So hello again. My name is Shin Han, and I'm the visiting assistant professor at St. Lawrence University. And I'll be hosting today's talk, Jisoo Hyun's talk. Joseon History Society has been hosting these Zoom events with participation of scholars from Korea, US, and Europe. And Joseon History Society is a public learned society fostering an active community of researchers and learners of Korea's past and connecting scholars working both inside and outside of professional academia across disciplines. We have launched this platform in 2021, and today is our 15th Zoom talk. We are very delighted to have audiences from many different places today. So good evening, good afternoon, and good morning. And I'm very excited to have Jisoo Hyun as our invited speaker. I'm grateful to have this moment to first hear from Jisoo Hyun and her work, and then also from the audience during the Q&A time. Please let me introduce today's speaker, Jisoo Hyun. Jisoo Hyun is a PhD candidate in the history of education program at the University of Washington, Seattle. Her dissertation project, on which today's talk is based, received the National Academy of Education / Spencer Dissertation Fellowship in 2020. She holds a master's degree in East Asian languages and culture from Columbia University. Prior to beginning her doctoral studies, she worked as a researcher at the Institute for Modern Korean Studies in Seoul. And there, she encountered the archives of two Korean private schools in Hawaii. One is the Korean Central School that existed between 1906, 1919, and another one is the Korean Christian Institute from 1915 till 1940. The stack of yellowing school records and photos, which includes pictures of smiling Korean immigrant kids, Anglo-American and Korean teachers, and lush Hawaiian palm trees, altogether fascinated her and led her to explore further. Well, congratulations for finding your treasure and the Holy Grail. And however, she found little documentation on the school in either Korean or American historiographies, and so ultimately decided to devote her doctoral dissertation to them. Her study focused on the schooling experiences of Korean immigrants in Territorial Hawaii between 1898 and 1959 and poses new questions about its substances and significances, not only in relation to the American imperial project, but also within the context of competing imperialism of the United States and Japan during the first half of the 20th century. Informed by a growing body of work on imperial education and education for global citizenship, her study aims to enrich our knowledge of the junctures between education and imperial project. So without further ado, please welcome Jisoo Hyun.
Oh, hello. Hi, everyone. Very nice to meet you all online today. And thank you so much for coming today. And also many thanks to the Joseon History Society and Dr. Han for this chance to talk about my research. And it's such a great pleasure for me to discuss what I have been finding thus far, and to hear some of your takes and insights afterward. This is a part of my dissertation project, which is I'm still working on. So it's a work in progress. So your feedback will be very valuable as I refine my thoughts and improve the whole project. Okay, so let's get started. I will share my screen. Oh, yeah. All right. my topic is, oh, hang on. It doesn't, excuse me.
Do you need help with moving the slides?
Oh, yeah, the slide doesn't actually, oh, okay. Oh, right, this one. Sorry.
Please take your time.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So my topic is educational experience of the first Korean immigrant community in territorial Hawaii. And I take the competing US and Japanese imperialisms of the early 20th century as important context, which not only inform the educational experience of the Korean immigrants, but also offers some perspective on the implications of transnational pedagogy, practices, and politics of historical actors involved who navigated a terrain charted by the competing imperatives of imperial expansion and nationalism across the Pacific during the first half of the 20th century. So I focus on specifically two private schools, the Korean Central School and the Korean Christian Institute. The Korean Central School was the very first Korean private school in Hawaii, and it was founded by the Hawaii Methodist Episcopal Mission. And the other one was the first self-governing school established by the Korean community leaders, especially Shin Man Ri, who went on to become the first president of the South Korea, of the Republic of Korea, South Korea, in 1948, as you know. Those schools were small in student population, but I think they are significant in two senses. First, they reflect the roles of education in formulating the politics of survival and belonging for an ethnic or racial minority community and in shaping their subjectivity. And second, the school's stories offer some insight into the connections between an immigrant or expatriate group's transnational experience and its conceptualization of nationhood and citizenship education. I organized this talk in two sections. First, I will talk about historical context, some relevant background on the early trans-Pacific Korean immigration to Hawaii. And then I will discuss the two Korean schools' stories in some detail, and then the historical implications of their stories. Okay. As you may know, in the first half of the 20th century, Hawaii was a colonial space, a Pacific territory annexed by the United States in 1898. And Hawaii was a society uniquely stratified into three groups: wealthy, powerful white colonials, and colonized native Hawaiians, and largely non-white, poor immigrant laborers, mostly from East Asia. At about the same time, Korea was itself under Japanese colonial rule and oppression. And thus, the early Korean trans-Pacific mass migration, which began in 1903, was in fact a displacement of people from one colonial space to another. Most early Korean immigrants to Hawaii were men recruited to work on the sugar plantations, but they also included hundreds of political refugees from Japanese colonial government persecution, primarily intellectuals and former government officials who came to Hawaii to launch an overseas independence movement. So in Hawaii, immigrant Koreans encountered powerful, privileged white Euro-Americans imperialistic impulse, like Americanization impulse, with their racial and economic subjugation of Oriental immigrants. But the Korean immigrants were also seized with the anti-colonial nationalistic zeal of Korean expatriates seeking independence for their homeland. So I will talk a little bit further about the contextual background of the early Korean trans-Pacific immigration. You might wonder why it began in the first place, what brought them to Pacific Islands 4,500 miles from home. In fact, in the early Korean immigration to Hawaii was intimately related to imperial projects of Japan and the US. It started as a result of the American annexation of Hawaii, and it was eventually halted for the sake of Japan's imperial ambitions. That is to say, the immigration played out at the nexus of American colonial and Japanese imperial struggle. Let me explain. When Korea's annexation of Hawaii was imminent, the islands of sugar plantation owners became very anxious about the ramifications. As a US territory, Hawaii would be subject to the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act. And this would deprive them of Chinese workers who had been diluting the labor market's Japanese majority. At that time, Japanese workers made up nearly 2/3 of the entire plantation workforce of Hawaii. So the plantation owners feared a future in which strike-prone Japanese workers monopolized plantation labor and agitated more frequently for wage increases. So the planters looked for a new source of cost-effective, submissive migrant workers who could substitute Chinese workers, and Koreans fit the bill. So the Hawaii plantation owners pulled some strings. They contacted American diplomat to Korea, Horace Allen, the very first Protestant missionary in Korea and a medical doctor. He already had strong personal ties with the Korean monarch and ruling class because of his successful medical treatment of high-ranking Korean officials. So the planters asked him to persuade the Korean government to permit official immigration of laborers to Hawaii. And Allen agreed to do so because he thought it would help deter a Japanese takeover of Korea. If American commercial interests in Korea increased, the US State Department's political interest in Korea would increase as well. So with the full support of Dr. Allen, the plantation owners convinced the Korean government to permit immigration of laborers to Hawaii in 1903. But this enterprise lasted only 2 years because in the summer of 1905, Japan suddenly intervened, forcing the Korean government to ban all such movement. Here's the reason why. A few months earlier, in the spring of 1905, the California legislature passed a resolution which recommended passage of a Japanese exclusionary bill. And it was designed to pressure Washington into excluding Japanese, as the Chinese had been excluded in 1882. And this news mortified Japan because such an act would place Japan in the same lowly position as China on the world stage, and it would almost negate Japan's prestige as an emerging world power, emerging imperial power. Interestingly, the Japanese Foreign Minister Komura Jutaro linked this threat to Korean immigrants in Hawaii. He perceived sort of a domino effect. Hawaii's cheaper Korean labor force, which suppressed the wages of Japanese laborers, had triggered a mass Japanese exodus from Hawaii to California, where the wages were double those in Hawaii. And this sudden influx of Japanese laborers alarmed Californians, sparking the fierce campaign for Japanese exclusion. So the Komura reasoned like this: if the supply of low-cost Korean labor to Hawaii was eliminated, the wages of Japanese workers in Hawaii would rebound and in return prevent them from moving to California. And this would serve to cool down the Golden State agitation for the Japanese Exclusion Act. So it was a matter of self-preservation. The Japanese had to exclude Koreans from Hawaii to prevent their own exclusion from the United States. For Japan, avoiding international loss of face and protecting its prestige as a non-white, non-Christian, non-Western colonizer was vital to its imperial projects and further ambitions. It was in these colonial entanglements of the trans-Pacific imperial powers, the US and Japan, and that impacted not only Korean schools' education in Hawaii, but also their struggle against the systems of inequality and subordination. So my research investigates the ways in which these Korean immigrants' status as a subjugated Japanese colonial subjects at home and as a stateless, racialized laboring caste in Hawaii shaped the Korean private schools' educational strategies, their decision-making, their approaches to the notion of Americanization, and their citizenship education of Korean American-born and American-raised students. Now I will briefly touch upon the history of two Korean private schools. I will begin with the Korean Central School, established by Hawaii Methodist Mission in 1906. And as I said before, this was the first Korean private school in Hawaii, and it was initially named the Korean boarding school for boys. The school was founded and run by American Methodist missionaries, but the initiative was Korean Christian leaders who recognized the need to serve the growing number of Korean children. Many Korean parents wanted their children to receive formal education that was on the level of Hawaii public schools, but with the addition of Korean language education. To those ends, the Korean Christian leaders formed an educational society and elected Reverend Wadman, superintendent of Methodist Mission, as chair of the society. The society envisioned the school as a boarding school to accommodate Korean youths from various sugar plantations throughout the islands. And it provided formal education up to 8th grade and offered English and Korean language classes following the Hawaii public school curriculum. And the school had been running quite smoothly with the support of Korean community until Japan's official colonization of Korea in 1910. At this time, Wadman and other Hawaii Methodist missionaries were severely rebuked by the Korean community for their outright pro-Japanese stance, which defended Japanese colonization, Japanese occupation of Korea as a benevolent uplifting of a backward nation. And making things worse, in 1913, Koreans discovered that Wadman had received financial support from the Japanese consulate in Hawaii to educate Japan's colonial subjects, the Koreans in Hawaii. And this news infuriated Koreans, and they demanded that Wadman cut all ties with their community. And the Korean parents and students of the Korean school even boycotted classes. Furthermore, Korean-immigrant leaders of the Korean National Association, which was most vital community organization of the Hawaii, and the sort of the fulcrum of the independence movement among Korean expatriates, launched a campaign for a separate Korean private school, completely independent of the Methodist Mission and any other outside influences for that matter. So this development involving angry Koreans and Japanese consulate and Japanese sympathizing American missionaries in Hawaii worried the Methodist leadership a great deal, because their Korean missionary work was the most successful among their mission enterprises in territorial Hawaii. So they were desperate to troubleshoot. It was under these circumstances that Shin Man Ri arrived in Hawaii, and he was nationalist exile, a Christian educator, and a recent Princeton PhD. Ri was one of the most prominent Korean leaders in the US, and he was immensely popular with Korean immigrants in Hawaii. So his coming to Hawaii just excited the whole community. In the eyes of American missionaries, Ri was the ideal mediator. According to one of the Methodist missionary high-ups, Ri was someone who, unlike other so-called less civilized working class Koreans in Hawaii, could deal with affairs in a wise Christian and statesmanlike manner. So the missionaries believed that Ri could help them to alleviate Koreans' resentment by translating American Protestant missionary intentions and actions into palpable Korean idioms for those unable or unwilling to negotiate or compromise for communal thriving and political viability. So in order to entice Ri to work for them, the Hawaii Methodist leadership made a promise to its Korean congregation and Ri. They issued an official resolution that they would secure a better equipped building for the Korean school and cooperate in all possible ways to make the Korean school's educational endeavor a success. Moved by their gesture, Ri accepted their request and took over as principal of the Korean boarding school shortly after he arrived in Hawaii. And after becoming principal, Shin Man Ri persuaded the Koreans and Korean National Association not to break with the Hawaii Methodist Mission and call off their plan to build a new independent Korean school. Instead, he asked them to join forces with American Methodist missionaries one more time for the sake of school's success. And in this light, Ri renamed the school the Korean Central School in the hope that it would become the educational hinge on which the Korean community in Hawaii could flourish. He then reorganized the school to include more advanced Korean language classes and classical Chinese and Korean history, Korean geography, and the school was bilingual, offering classes in English in the morning and in Korean in the afternoon. And as an advocate for Korean girls' education, we made the school co-educational in the late 1913. So under his leadership, the student enrollment rapidly increased from about like the 40s to 120. And it also enhanced its reputation and influence in the Korean community and beyond. But in 1915, Ri suddenly resigned as a principal, and this was due to a brewing conflict with the Hawaii Methodist Mission over the issues such as a school curriculum, delayed funding from the mission, and Korean female education. Ri was getting really frustrated with the Methodist mission for not delivering what their resolution had promised regarding the improvement of school facilities. And the mission disapproved of Ri and his Korean teaching staff's nationalistic insistence on teaching Korean classes, as well as Ri's growing influence over the school's management, including fiscal management, financial management. But more importantly, the mission was strongly against Ri's decision to admit female Korean students based on the agreement within the Methodist mission that Korean school educate only Korean boys and leaving the education of Korean girls to Methodist Women's Home Missionary Society's private school for all Oriental female students, including Japanese, Chinese, and Filipino girls. The Methodist mission argued that it was church policy to assign Korean male and female education to different Methodist mission bodies. So the Methodist Women's Home Missionary Society should be in charge of female education. But Shin Man Ri found such segregation very unfair since it deprived Korean girls of opportunities to receive both an English and a Korean education, an opportunity that many of them desired. So these conflicts over the ownership of Korean female education ultimately led Ri and his supporters not only to break away from the Methodist mission, but also to launch a movement to establish a self-governing Korean community-based private school under the slogan, "The Korean Schools by Koreans' Own Hands." So 5 months after leaving the Korean Central School, Ri and his followers founded the Korean Girls Seminary with the money coming almost entirely from Korean community donations. And Ri himself assumed the post of a principal. You can see the picture of Shin Man Ri and others leveling the ground for the dormitory of Korean Girls Seminary. And there's and also the picture of another ground leveling. And as you can see, there's a little girl smiling brightly among the Korean workers, which is quite symbolic, I think. So literally and figuratively, Koreans indeed built the school, the Korean school, with their own hands. Founding a school on their own meant a lot, obviously. The Korean immigrants and expatriates in Hawaii had long been subjected to racialized imperialistic paternalism on both sides of the Pacific, which viewed Koreans as a people unfit for self-government, almost on the level of children needing care and guidance. So the Koreans saw their founding and running of their own schools not merely as an effort to expand education opportunities for their children, but also, if not more so, as a showcase for national autonomy, self-determination, and self-governance envisioned for their homeland. So it was a manifestation of their deferred ambitions for independence and control, which had been crushed under Japanese colonial rule in Korea. Reporting on the school's opening on Hawaii's leading English newspapers underlined its biracial American and Korean faculty, and noted that the school's purpose was to take Korean girls from various plantations in Hawaii and give them a proper American education and training. With a student body of approximately 60 and 70, the school offered a 6-year elementary course and 2-year middle school course. And to meet US standards, we recruited several Anglo-American teachers, and the curriculum for all grades was designed to mesh with Hawaii's public school system to ensure the students could matriculate into local public high schools or even college later. Here you can see the curriculum for the 1917 and 18 academic year. It included hygiene, geography and literature, phonics, spelling, penmanship, American history, Hawaiian history, and Korean language classes, and so on. And yeah, and also this is the photo of the school's classic band, and girls hold musical instruments like cello, violin, contrabass, and so on. And here you can see also the newspaper article about a concert they gave. And this photo shows that the school provided some extracurricular activities that the students can enjoy after school. The Korean Girls Seminary, financially and spiritually independent from the Hawaii Methodist missionaries, was the first self-governing Korean private school in Hawaii and in the continent America to have been established almost entirely by Koreans. In covering its founding, the Honolulu Star Bulletin newspaper reported on the significance of the school in the context not only of Hawaii, but also of colonial Korea. It says, the only strictly Korean school in the world today is Korean Girls Seminary, where 60 Korean girls are being taught in both English and Korean, keeping alive the Korean ideals and at the same time being made ready for their American citizenship. the Korean schools in Korea have been taken over by Japanese. So they are now Japanese schools teaching as far as possible in Japanese. Elsewhere in the world, there are no Korean schools of any kind except the Korean Girls Seminary. But this only strictly Korean school did not mean that it was completely disassociated from so-called its American friends. The school board of trustees included a number of Anglo-Americans, and this fact disappointed many Koreans. They had expected that the Korean school would be owned and run solely by Koreans without any external influence whatsoever. There was even a rumor within the Korean community that the school would end up falling into the hands of white Americans. But Ri and other Korean teachers told the Koreans that having those influential Americans on the board was strategic and beneficial. Ri explained that it can boost the status of the school as an exemplary educational work to other nationalities in Hawaii and benefit the school's finances as well. Further, he said, by having such prominent Americans on our side, not only the image of our school, but also that of the Korean community in general is elevated among the white Americans in Hawaii. 3 years later, the Korean Girls Seminary was offered a 6-year elementary course and a 2-year middle school course. 3 years later, the Korean Girls Seminary was transformed into a co-educational institution and renamed the Korean Christian Institute. And true to its name, the school emphasized Christian education, offering daily Bible study. And Ri and his teaching staff were passionate about providing their students with a classical education and leadership training. And so with the student body, approximately like 100, the school offered a 6-year elementary course and a 2-year middle school course. And Ri and his Korean faculty always try to formulate curricular for all grades in accordance with those of Hawaii's public school system, thus gaining the approval of the territorial government and its Americanization education campaign. Now, as a virtually independent and community-supported Korean school in Hawaii, the Korean Christian Institute was a target of criticism for many white elites and missionaries. For example, the Hawaii Methodist Mission openly criticized the school from its beginning, arguing that the school represents a desire on the part of some Koreans to demonstrate their ability to do things without the help of mission board, and also to keep their children from being Americanized. And especially in 1917, Theodore Richards, one of the leading Christian educators, circulated an open letter to prominent white leaders in Hawaii, attacking the establishment of the Korean Christian Institute and its non-affiliated status. He claimed that the school promoted racial exclusiveness and followed educational practices that ran against Hawaii's Americanization policy. And Richards then suggested merging the Korean school with the Mid-Pacific Institute, one of the best English-speaking private schools on the islands, run by Hawaiian Evangelical Association, more than half of its students being Japanese. The Mid-Pacific Institute, he argued, had shown itself capable of handling the Oriental problem and should be able to add the Korean element. In response, Ri issued a 9-page open letter to argue against Richard's charges. Ri's letter began by saying the sentiment and the language employed in Mr. Richards' letter show signs of prejudice against the Korean. And with respect to the issue of racial exclusiveness, Ri asked have the Korean people in Hawaii or anywhere under the sun ever shown a desire for racial segregation any more than the Japanese, Americans, or any other race? And then he emphasized that Korean school actually promoted Christian education, unlike other heathen non-Christian Asians. He said Japanese and Chinese schools belong some to Shintoism, some to Buddhism of several branches, and some to one kind or another of other heathen religions. They teach these so-called future citizens of America all the ideas of their heathenism, even most of the good, generous Americans, both Christian and non-Christian, give money and land and buildings without asking a word whether they are independent or dependent. And he continued, now when the poor Christian Koreans, loyal to Methodist mission ever since their arrival in Hawaii, begin for the first time to do something for their own children at their own expense with a board of Anglo-Saxon trustees, one opposition after another has been raised against them. And then he indicated the Korean schools' commitment to promoting Americanization education. He said the Americanizing influence is even more effective in a boarding school than in just a day school because under the best influence of American Christian teachers mingling with the Korean students day and night, the students learn more about American manners, American housekeeping, American ideals than under any other arrangements that we can think of. And then he concluded, the Koreans are not trying to create a big educational center which will hang heavy as a white man's burden, nor will they maintain a racial exclusiveness against the general policy adopted in Hawaii. These Koreans are really Americanizing their own children at their own expense, thus contributing their humble share toward the Americanizing and Christianizing agencies of the melting pot. So to earn legitimacy for institution in the face of the Americanization crusade that swept the US during and after World War I, not to mention Americans' growing distrust of foreign practices, Ri and other Korean educators aligned their school with the Christian mission schools proliferating all over Hawaii at the time. So they strategically foregrounded their school as a Christian mission school rather than an ethnic school. Ri, as you can see in the mission statement, Ri and his fellow educators emphasized the school's mission to provide Korean students with a good Christian education so that they could become good citizens in both America and Korea, build good families, and become good leaders of Korean community as well as American society. For Ri and his colleagues, operation of the school by the Koreans themselves was really important because it provided an opportunity for Koreans to develop the responsibility of educating their own children. Ri believed that it would make the Koreans a better and more self-respecting people, more conscious of the fact that they were performing their full duty as a parents and as citizens. By providing Americanization education on their own terms, by their own hands, in their own space, and at their own expense, Koreans felt that they were exerting their civic agency and so empowering themselves. Korean Christian Institute operated until 1940. And it was the central educational institution for the Koreans in Hawaii for many years. And in fact, many of its graduates became prominent leaders of the Korean Hawaiian community and of liberated Korea later. In conclusion, finally, The stories of Korean private schooling and Korean immigrants' effort to develop what they thought to be a proper education for their youth in Hawaii reveal quite complicated subjectivities for this doubly stateless minority, people whose national subjecthood was denied by imperialist Japan and whose obtaining of American citizenship was prohibited by the exclusionist US. So my paper argues that Korean educators and immigrant parents in Hawaii were very active and persistent and creative in their efforts to appropriate and rework Americanization education for their own national, communal, and individual interests. Their purposes were to take control of their children's education and challenge the prevailing anti-Asian political climate and prepare Korean youth to become community leaders and even promote their anti-colonial nationalism. And their efforts to differentiate themselves from other Asian immigrants through the adoption of Christian pedagogical practices, and thereby clearly define their place, make a claim to their place in white Protestant America. These efforts challenge the assumption of a homogeneous Asian American education experience during the early 20th century. And at the same time, their engagement with the other ethnic and racial groups provides some insight into diverging pathways of Americanization and assimilation. So Korean immigrants, teachers and educators offered a distinctive brand of Americanization and civic education. And in the process, they developed a new form of subjectivity, one that emerged out of a desire to establish Korean national sovereignty, promote ethnic nationalism, and create cultural differentiation, and all while trying to emulate and assimilate into Protestant America. So the case of the Korean private schools and the agency exerted by Korean immigrant educators and other community members complicates the history and historiography of Americanization education in territorial Hawaii, but it also enhances our understanding of imperial projects and various forms of subjectivity and identification, which are not easily classified as resistance or collaboration, exclusion or inclusion, autonomy or assimilation among colonized and or subordinated population. By looking at the stories of Korean schools and their politics of education, we can get some glimpse into a complex early 20th century trans-Pacific immigrant world, a world that was shaped by multiple hegemonic forces of imperialism, nationalism, and religion, race, and ethnicity. So these stories ultimately reveal a novel form of modern subjectivity, one which transnational education generated within a very specific historical and regional setting. So that's all. Thank you for your listening, and thank you for your attention. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jisoo Hyun. That was, wonderful. Yeah. So let's give another big round of applause to Jisoo Hyun. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thanks again for sharing this wonderful work with us. And yes, so now what you're going to do is to do a question and answer session. So I'll be moderating the Q&A time, which will be about 30 minutes. So if you have questions, so there are two ways to ask question to Jisoo. First, you can use raise hand function in the Zoom meeting to let me know that you want to ask questions so that I can see your icon, raise hand icon next to your name, and I'll call you out and ask you to unmute yourself and raise the question. Another way is to use a chat box. So if you want to leave your question in a text, you can type down your question in the chat box, and I will also organize them in order and have Jisoo to answer those questions accordingly. I will read out loud those questions in the chat box on behalf of the person who raised the question and to let everyone know. So, and also your question will be also available to be seen in everyone in this Zoom meeting. So before I give chance to anyone else, I also want to ask question to Jisoo. So to me, it seems like this is a fascinating work to see that there are so many kind of different agents who are working in relations to the question of how to educate the new generation of Korean Americans in Hawaii. So there are Koreans, Japanese, and the U.S. officials, and also Western missionaries, etc. So there are multiple ways to see that how these issues was discussed and addressed by these different groups, which all have their own agendas. Mm-hmm. So what I'm curious here is that whether you happen to come up with any kind of discrepancies among those kind of groups that you have presented as a one group, so such as the Korean Americans in Hawaii. So it seems like from what Shin Man Ri was kind of distinguishing Koreans from other Asian groups in Hawaii, like Chinese or Japanese, seems like there are some religious diversity that existed among those non-Korean Asian American people. So people who are practicing Shintoism, people who are practicing Buddhism, and I guess that might be also the case for Koreans as well. So many of them might be just not just Christians, but also have their other religious background who wants to insist on keeping their religious integrity. And I'm wondering how those kind of people are voiced out in this new visions of creating a Korean ethnic school under the guise of a Christian missionary school. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense. And I have been thinking about that issue as well, because that is a great question. Thank you so much. And as you said, there's a very big conflict within Korean community regarding the way the Shin Man Ri educated Korean youth. And actually, there are many other Korean educators and community leaders oppose the Shin Man Ri's way of dealing with American missionaries and also coming up with this so-called Christianization education and Americanization education. But so there are different Korean schools, small Korean schools, just established by different Korean immigrant educators. I haven't actually looked at them, but I'm really, really curious of their schools. But unfortunately, Shin Man Ri's school was they have the loudest voice in Korean communities. So that's why we have relatively a lot of more documents and primary sources than other small schools. But I'm definitely trying to find look at some trying to find some other schools stories and cases. And also, as I said, the Korean community, there was the biggest religion was, of course, Christianity. Almost like 60% of the whole Korean immigrant community identify themselves as Christians. So it's because it doesn't really mean that they were really sincere Christians, but because the Korean the church and the Methodist mission was a big organization that provide a lot of help to the Korean immigrants. So it was a good kind of community organization. So that's why the many Koreans converted to Christians. But I'm sure there are some other religious groups like Buddhist groups and some other religion believers. But also I at this moment, I don't have much information and evidence to talk about their positionality or their stance towards the Korean schools. So, but that is another stuff that I really look at later. Anyway, thank you so much for your question. And I should let you know that there's a conflicting different ideas within Korean community and beyond about how to educate so-called Oriental students in Hawaii. What is the best way to make them assimilate into the American society?
Yeah, thank you so much for that answer. That really makes sense of why Sung Man Ri was so loud, because he was also kind of competing with other Koreans in terms of kind of addressing his agenda, prioritizing it by trying to dominate the resources. So it totally makes sense. Yeah, Sung Man Ri was kind of infamous for kind of wherever he goes. Yeah, kind of he is infamous for dividing all the Korean communities.
Dividing and always the conflicts and problems.
Creating his own factions, kind of building up his charisma. Thank you so much. So I will let first Soo-yeon Kim to raise question, and then I'll read the other questions that are raised in the chat box. So Soo-yeon Kim, so whenever you're ready, you can ask question.
Hello, can you hear, is the mic working?
Yeah.
Great. Great. So thank you so much for your talk. And thank you so much for organizing this event. I'm not a historian by training. I'm actually a master's student in education at the University of Pennsylvania. And, but I myself am a product of sort of, I went to an international school in Korea, and this story, it resonated with me in a personal level, not in terms of sort of the faith-based elements, but more about sort of, you know, this idea of complicated subjectivities and sort of a doubly denied sort of person or a subject.
Subjectivity, yes.
Yes, exactly. I guess my question for you is, I guess, and maybe this is more, and this might be speaking to my lack of understanding of historical methodology, but I'm wondering, like in this project, would you also have any like in-person interview or like follow up with, because now that I think about it, like during this period, I'm sure it would be difficult to track down the descendants or but I'm wondering if that is ever will be a component of your project. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question. That is also one of the most difficult issue that I was tackling. I mean, because I wanted to include voices of students, not just the teachers and Shin Man Ri and big community leaders, but it was really, really difficult to find the students' voice. But there are some oral kind of books like this one, which was is compiled the oral history, or I mean oral interviews of the first generations Korean-American immigrants in Hawaii and their descendants. So some of them vividly remember their father helped Shin Man Ri build the Korean schools, and also some of them actually went to the Korean Christian Institute, and they didn't like it. So since it wasn't about their education experience, it was about the whole their immigration experience, they just briefly touch upon the issue. But I really wanted to include some, if there's a way that I can include some first-hand voices of or testimony of the Korean students who went to the school, that it would be wonderful. But I have some documents written by some of the most so-called successful graduates of the schools, that they always spoke very highly of the Shin Man Ri and their experience in their schooling in those schools. But there must be some other opinions and some other experience and voices. But at this moment, my dissertation is about the kind of official documents and administrators' point of view of operating schools. And yeah, so I wish I could include more students' voice. And yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much for wonderful question, Suyeon Kim. So next, I will move to our audience in the chat box. So first we have Edward Schultz. So hello, Edward. And let me read out loud your question, if I may. So thank you for this interesting talk. What % of Korean youth were in the Korean Christian Institute as opposed to public education?
That's a good question. Yes. Actually, most of the students that I dealt with was kind of 1.5 generation. That means this school flourished right before the picture brides came and gave birth a lot of children, which comprised second generation, right? So these schools were for the students who were born in Korea, and they went along with their parents to Hawaii when they were really, really young. So basically, they were not born in Hawaii. So we called them as 1.5 generation. And also, and also some students were born in Hawaii, but they never went to any public school, so they didn't speak English at all. So at the time when I was researching these schools in 1910, there's a 50% of Korean students went to private schools, and almost 50% of whole Korean schools, Korean students went to public school. But in the 1920s, the situation became really different. So more than like 2/3 of more than like 70% of the whole student population went to public school. So it's only like 30% or something like that went to the private school. So I'm not really, I don't have specific information right now, but it's in these schools, the population of these Korean schools became kind of a very deteriorating in a way as time went by. It was really popular in 1910s and early 1920s and mid 20s, but then and in the end of the 1920s and 30s, parents preferred sending their children to public schools because they have more quality education. They have more education provision and everything. Yeah. Is my answer is good for your question? I'm not sure.
Well, I think so. Yeah, it kind of raises new questions of how this ended. But yeah, I think it is for a very new, interesting research. So thanks for that answer. And let me read out loud one more question from the chat box, and then I'll move to Youngho Jung. So sorry, Youngho, for keep you raise your hand. So yeah, you'll be next person after reading Joseph Seeley's question. Thanks for waiting. So let me read Joseph Seeley's question. Thanks for coming. So thank you for a great talk. While I was a long-standing interest in Korean diasporic histories, I recently read a translation of the Korean book, Aloha, 나의 엄마들, or Aloha, my mothers, which made me even more excited for this talk. You mentioned that the presence of non-Korean faculty and board members at the Korean school was unwelcome to some Korean nationalists. Did these faculty and board members ever make statements or teach things in the classroom that offended the sensibilities of Korean pupils or their parents?
Oh, you mean the board of trustees, the Anglo-Americans? What was your question? Was Korean faculty and board members at the schools was unwelcome? Korean faculties were not unwelcome, but board members, Anglo-Americans, well, the Korean some Koreans, they didn't like the idea of having Anglo-Americans board members for their schools. So, but they didn't really concern. I mean, they didn't really intervene the management of the schools. So I don't think they necessarily offend Koreans' sensibilities or the sensibilities of Korean students or their parents. But American missionaries, Methodist missionary, they did, as I said before.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's an excellent question. And kind of the lingering kind of thought to me is that whether there was any kind of actual kind of incidents that Board of Trustee really kind of, provoked anger from the Koreans. It was just kind of a general tendency, or yeah, was there any kind of indicators?
Indicators? Not that I know of, because yeah, Shin Man Ri had a very strong grip of those Anglo-Americans board members. So, so they were just they are in names. They were board members, but they just provided some financial aids, and that's all. They didn't really intervene, or they didn't really try to make some change to the school management, and they were also a great supporter of Shin Man Ri as well. So.
Okay, thank you. So now I'll move back to our Zoom live members. So we have Young-Oh Jung. So hi, Young-Oh. Yeah, nice to see you again here. So please, yeah, you're already unmuted. So the floor is yours.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Hi, Jisoo. My name is Young-Oh. I'm a PhD candidate at UC San Diego History Department. I actually also work on the history of Korean diaspora during the same period and its connection to militarism. And this talk has been amazing because I actually one of my chapters deals with militarized education by Park Yong-man, who established military academies in Nebraska and also in Hawaii. And
yeah.
So my question is, and you answered this a little bit in your talk, but I think I kind of want to hear more about your approach. Like, so how do you approach the normalized racialized hierarchies embedded within the formation and maintaining of these schools? So what I mean by that is anything Koreans had to do in the name of independence and autonomy, including establishing of these schools, had to be conducted in the manner of subservience to the U.S. empire and like the white haole plantation owners there. So and loyalty to them, especially through their relationship, establishing Christianity has been normalized, as I can see by your talk. Do you kind of see any connections to like missionary schools established in Korea by like Yoon Chi-hoon missionaries earlier on in the early 1900s? And in your work, do you address kind of these missionary racisms represented by these languages of racial progress and racial uplift that started in those missionary schools? And second question is, because I'm a historian, I'm always thinking about archives. Which kind of archives do you use? And I was actually wondering if you've been to the University of Hawaii Center for Korean Studies archives. I was actually there just last month for a week, and they had a lot of textbooks and stuff on the schools there. So just a question on like what kind of sources you use and which archives you visited, if you are open to sharing. So thank you.
Thank you for the great questions. I'm so interested in Bagyong's schools, and also Bagyong is a great enemy of Shin Man Ri, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
they had very different ideas and in education and in and independence movement as well. Anyway, so fascinating topic. Congratulate on your choice of topic, and I will talk about your second question first. In terms for the archive, I went to Hawaii Korean Studies Center there, but I haven't found much information about the schools. So my main archive was the Shin Man Ri's institution, because the Shin Man Ri personally kept big album for these schools. So the photos, most of the photos that I showed today comes from his own personal archive and his photo albums. So, and then also I found some school-related primary sources in Korea's independence museum in Cheonan, which is located in Cheonan.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so it was there was some files related to Hawaii's independence movement, and some of the under that file I found these some primary sources about these schools, and yeah, that was my main sources. But I'm not sure about what kind of archive are you going to use for Park Young-a's school?
UCLA, USC, and University of Hawaii. So the main archives for the Korean diaspora, I think, in North America. So those UCLA, I actually found this random textbook that was translated from English to Korean, teaching young mothers about taking care of babies and stuff like that. So there were scattered stuff on the education on those different archives. So yeah.
Yeah, I also found came across the in Korean language textbooks published by Korean National Association, right?
Yeah.
Which was stored in Hawaii library, right? Yeah. And it was fascinating what kind of contents they have. And then also your first question about this the mission schools. Okay, so what was your question again? It was
sorry.
about.
It was long. So it was about like, the racialized hierarchies embedded within the formation of maintaining these schools, and if there are any connections to the early missionary schools established in Korea by like Yoon Chi-ho, and a lot of that was, I think, recently some scholars have like Chang Ko have been writing about missionary racism and how language of racial uplift were used to like maintain and the pedagogy of uplifting Koreans from poverty and all of that was very much missionary racism. So like, were there any of those kind of like racialized norms kind of embedded in some of the stuff that you found, and how you're talking about them in your dissertation?
Yeah, the relationship between American missionaries and Korean Christians, well, most complicated relationship, I think, that I should discuss in my dissertation. I don't want to paint the American missionaries as just agents of American imperialism or just racialist American, what do you call it, agents of Americanism. But I mean, of course they had a racialized perspective towards Korean students and Korean Christians, but also there's a sort of symbiotic relationship, I think. What I'm saying is definitely there's a racialism embedded in the American church and American mission field, but also there's some sort of a very progressive and liberal ideas to be able to be more inclusive, right? In terms of mission work and also education. So I don't know. It's just it's very difficult to elaborate right now, but that is one of the, of course, the most important topic that I should delve into more. I mean, in my dissertation. Yeah. So that's how to deal with their. I mean, how to talk about their relationship. I mean, the relationship between American missionaries and Korean educators. And as you can see, Shin Man Ri wasn't just victim of the American missionaries' racialist attitude or ideas, right? Shin Man Ri also fought against it, and he, in a way, he manipulated their American missionaries' ideas and also their practices as they and take advantage of their stance. So yeah, it's a really complicated one. Yeah, I wish I could listen to your opinion on that further. maybe
Oh,
later.
there's other questions, so
Okay.
maybe I'll know you later. Thank you so much.
Maybe in your dissertation.
So thank you so much for the wonderful question, Young-ho, and also for the fantastic answers. So let's now move on to another question that we have in the chat box from Howard Kam. So hello, Howard Kam. So thank you for the question. Let me read out loud your question. So thank you for the talk. You mentioned that graduates of the school stayed in Korea or went to work in post-liberation Korea. I think at that end of the talk. So do you know the percentages, and does that indicate anything about I'm sorry, I was just trying to read the additional kind of modification here. So let me read it again. So you mentioned that graduates of the school stayed in Hawaii or went to work in post-liberation Korea. So do you know the percentage of those people, and does that indicate anything about the nature of the school as either a local community school versus a Korean-American school for Koreans studying abroad?
Yeah, okay, this is great questions. The percentage of, I cannot tell the exact percentage of the graduates who went to Korea to work for Korea, but as far as I know, there's a I don't know, it's hard to give you some figures, but I know there are like 10 very prominent graduates, students who became a big follower of Shin Man Ri, and they went to Korea to work for his first administration. So at least we have like 9 or 10 graduates who went to Korea, but I haven't really traced back to the graduates careers in Korea or in Hawaii. I found some few cases of the students, but yeah, that is I also wondering how many percentage, but it's at this moment it's really difficult to trace back and what the students did after their graduation. And but I can tell you most 80%, almost 80% of the graduates, they went to higher education, so either college in Hawaii or a college in US, the continent America. So high percentage of graduates went to college and university, and they became very kind of have a professional jobs either in Korea or in Hawaii.
I'm 100% on your side. That I think that's the reason why those parents are sending their kids to school to get educated, get a professional job, so that they can be a great man.
Sure.
Great people
And also Shin Man Ri played a kind of great role model for the Korean students. And then all they watched was working class, their parents, but then they saw the Shin Man Ri, who had a PhD, a degree from one of the most prestigious university in the US. And he was respected not only by Koreans, but also Americans. So Shin Man Ri just set really good a model for Korean youngsters. And another question is to the nature of the school, as either a local community school versus a Korean American school for Koreans studying abroad. Well, it's hard to tell. Korean American schools for Koreans studying abroad. I think it's not our. I'm not in a position to characterize, because it depends on how students perceive their education, right? And or how they use their education for their career. So some students maybe think their school as a local community school, but well, I mean, but Shin Man Ri and other Korean Americans, Korean immigrant educators try to make their schools as a Korean schools for the Korean leaders, future leaders. So, so not just they want their students to work for Korea, not just for United States. So in that case, I don't know, but maybe, but students or their parents have different ideas, but it's hard to say nature of school as either local community schools versus Korean American school for Koreans studying abroad. What do you think? Well, I will think about this question. Yeah, thank you, Howard. Howard Kim, Howard Kim. Do I pronounce your name correctly?
I believe it's Howard Kam. Yeah,
Howard Kam. Yeah, that's yeah, the nature of a school as a local community school versus. Well, I will think. Okay, it's hard to answer your question right now, but I will think about your question and try to answer that one in my dissertation.
So yeah, I think that really answers this very difficult question very well. So thank you so much for that answer. So let me move on to the next question that we have in the chat box. So this one is from Seung-Yup Shin. So hi Seung-Yup, yeah, it's so great to see you here again. So let me read out your question. So thank you very much for your very interesting talk. I would like to ask a couple of questions. First one. Shin Man Ri was a Presbyterian from Pyongan region. Did he experience any personal and interpersonal conflicts when he accepted position at the Methodist school in Hawaii? The second question here is, I see a contradiction within American educators and leaders in Hawaii because they knew that the US government was maintaining the exclusive racial policy, in parentheses, restricting on giving US citizenship to Koreans, in parentheses. But they criticized Sung Man Ri's institute for not, quote unquote, Americanizing Korean girls. What really made them oppose the Korean Educational Institute? Religion does not seem to be an issue given that other Asian schools were not criticized for not providing Christian education.
Okay, thank you so much for your great questions. Number one, the Shin Man Ri was Presbyterian, yes, and he went to Beje University, Beje school, which was a Presbyterian mission school, right? But Shin Man Ri didn't care really much about a denomination. Well, because as long as he took advantage of of the mission, American missions. I don't think that he really cares too much about this denominational stuff. So, well, and then also he went to Methodist University in United States. The Princeton is Methodist, no? I'm not sure. Anyway, so there is. So he didn't experience any personal and impersonal conflicts when he accepted that one. And then your second question, yes, there's a lot of contradictions within the Korean American educators, and that's why Shin Man Ri pointed out that while Americans they racialize all the different races according to their own standards, and then they accused Korean schools of being racially exclusive, right? So, but the American missionaries and Hawaii's American educators, they attacked Korean schools because at the time there was a big Americanization campaign, and then also Japanese language schools was severely criticized for teaching anti-Christian and anti-American ideas to Japanese American students. So religion religion is not the only issue, but the Christianity is part of the Americanism in USA at the time. So anti-Christian ideas were considered anti-Americanisms. So that's why the Japanese language school run by Shinto, what do you call it? Shintoist priests, or Buddhist priests were severely criticized by American educators as well. And so that's in those lines, the Korean schools was also attacked by American Christians, because even though they claim themselves as Christian mission, they also impart very anti-colonial Korean nationalistic ideas into to their students, which is maybe they think that hampered their Korean students' Americanization. So, yeah, is it okay? Or do I answer your question enough?
Yeah, I do believe so. Yeah, thank you so much for that answer.
Okay.
So yeah, I think that's pretty much everything that we have in our chat box and from our floor. So maybe I can also say this will be the kind of end of our Zoom talk today. So again, yeah, thank you so much, Jisoo Hyun, for presenting your fascinating work. This cutting edge work really kind of help us to understand how education can be a very contested field for different forces, different agencies. And we really kind of learn a lot from how different histories, Korean history, Japanese history, US history, all intersects in this very interesting arena. So thank you so much for bringing all these things together. And thank you for the generosity for the audience, for sharing your thoughts and questions and giving those meaningful feedback to today's presenter.
Yeah, thank you so much for your great questions and insights and comments. And really, they are really, really helpful for my work and for me personally as well. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So thanks for the generosity of the previous participants. Most of the talks of Joseon History Society's talks are now available on our YouTube channel. You can find the link from our chat box that I posted here. We have our website, YouTube channel. And if you have a request for another Zoom talk or ideas about the Zoom events, please send them us through the link that I provided here. And we are hoping to set up the lecture series lineup for the 2023. So please let me know if you are interested in doing so. So that'll be it for today's session. So thanks again, everyone, for participating. And I hope you have a great night, a great afternoon, and a great day. Thank you.